I've covered many games over the years, but if you had to describe my channel in just a couple words, I would say Slop Reviewer fits it almost perfectly. Now, of course, usually that means I'm reviewing terrible games, or at the very least, mediocre games that don't try to innovate. They don't even really iterate properly over previous games in the series. No, most of the time it's just disappointing sequels, quote-unquote original IPs that are just DEI woke slop funded by BlackRock. And in the last couple years, we've seen the rise of a whole new genre, the mind's eye-like, essentially money laundering schemes. However, today we're going to do something a little bit different. I'm still going to be reviewing Slop, but this time, it's actually pretty good. Now, you guys know me by now. I'm not the type who's going to say that indie games are a replacement for AAA. That's just a lie. There's been a million similar videos made on this subject. Maybe someday I'll make one of my own, but to put it shortly, most indie games are just highly derivative, either of each other or of older games we all grew up with, whether it's puzzle platformers, roguelikes, boomer shooters, deck builders, vampire survivor clones, the entire friend slop subgenre. These are all types of games that have been made 100 times before. While the subject of today's video, Strange Seed, is not completely original or unique by any stretch, at least it is significantly different than its inspiration. It's essentially a Spore-like. Well, I guess it's more like an action-adventure game that's inspired by the Spore creature stage and with elements of Souls-likes. Now, I know some of you groaned as soon as I said Souls-like, but trust me, it's not really that type of game. It just borrows a few superficial elements like bonfires and enemies respawning in a similar way. It is certainly not a ball-bustingly hard game by any stretch. Now, I don't think Spore itself needs any introduction. This was one of the biggest gaming disappointments back in the day, yet for anyone who grew up with it, I think we all kind of still have fond memories of it. I know I do. And for most people, their favorite stages of the game were the creature stage and the space stage, as they were the most unique and probably had the most polish to them. In the case of the former, using your newly evolved Spore cell that has gained the ability to walk on land, your new goal is to become the dominant life form on the planet, either by devouring all of the various prey or making friends with them if you're an herbivore, or optionally an omnivore. This gives you DNA points which you can use after mating with any partner of your own species you find to mutate the next generation into an even more powerful creature, a very goofy take on evolution. Now, I'm sure we all remember fucking around with the Spore creature creator for hours, making really dumb looking animals because the thing was actually quite limited, but at the time it was incredibly novel because there was nothing else like it. And so Strange Seed is very similar conceptually. You start out as the titular Strange Seed, a little purple blob that can devour animals and gain the ability to morph his various body parts into whatever he eats. And you're kind of just dropped into this game with no real direction. You just explore these mini sandbox levels, eat animals, grow more powerful, take down bosses, move to the next mini sandbox level. And the evolution system in this game is obviously very similar to Spore, as you could probably tell. And mechanically, it functions very similar to Spore as well, where attaching various parts to your creature gives it the abilities of that animal. As you would expect, attaching wings gives the creature the ability to fly. Different heads give you different types of attacks, so on and so forth. It's not as open as Spore, where you can actually attach vertebrae or put the various parts anywhere you want on the creature, but you can affect their general size. You can delete parts of the creature to just make whatever disgusting abomination you want. But I think the important thing that gives this game an advantage over Spore is that it's an actual game. Let's be honest, Spore was basically a glorified tech demo. You're on a randomly generated planet. In some ways, it was kind of like the original No Man's Sky. So there was nothing really handcrafted about the levels. Here, this is, you know, like a traditional video game. This reminded me a lot of a PS2 sort of hidden gem game that you had a fever dream about playing as a child. You try to tell other people about it as you grow up, and they've never fucking heard of it. You're not even sure if it's real, because last time you played it was when you were like 7 years old. And no one ever talks about it online 20 years later. Despite this looking like a Unity asset flip, at at many points, it genuinely has soul. Just the core concept carries this game so far. And you know, this is a Synthetic Man review, so I'm not gonna glaze this game, as you know. I'm gonna tear it a new asshole in a second. But I do have to make it clear right at the beginning that I had fun playing this from start to finish, despite its many limitations and its incredibly poorly designed combat. Which, of course, you know, it's one of my reviews, so let's talk about the gameplay really quick. So the combat is bafflingly bad. I'm gonna put it that simply. So as I just mentioned, your creature's attack is usually attached to whatever head part you chose, but sometimes arms, legs, and even your creature's tail can have an attack, and you can have multiple different attacks equipped at the same time. I think that's all great, but there is one absolutely massive flaw with this combat system. Every single attack in the game requires you to stand still to initiate it. On top of this, enemies attack in the exact same way you do, with some weird notable exceptions where enemies can spam attacks with basically no startup and no ending lag. I have no idea why, but that aside, for the most part, you and the enemies have the same pool of attacks. So this entire combat system is walking in front of an enemy, waiting for them to start an attack, strafing 90 degrees to the left or right of them, initiate your attack, rinse and repeat until you win. That is every single one-on-one encounter in this game. Even when it's multiple enemies, strafing around the circle still pretty much gets the job done. Most attacks in this game have the exact same properties. It's just a melee attack that hits a certain distance in front of you, with there only being a handful of projectile and area of effect moves in the game. Attacks also have a cooldown attached to them, so you can't even spam the R1 button over and over again, with the only benefit to this system being that individual attacks you have equipped have their own cooldowns, so there is actually a pretty big benefit to your DPS to have multiple attacks equipped. That's something I didn't even figure out until most of the way through the game, but that's about as far as the complexity goes. Now, I could autistically dissect every type of attack, but genuinely, if you just look at the screen right here, you can see this combat is fucking ass. This game is either mind-numbingly easy or unfairly punishing with no in-between. There's very little player input for any skill other than the strafing I just mentioned and building a creature with a sufficient amount of speed that you can simply just avoid the few enemies in the game that have deadly AoE attacks. And even then, near the end of the game, when you start fighting mantis shrimp, if 3 of these guys are chasing you, you're not avoiding their punch explosions. You're just gonna fucking die. And this shouldn't surprise anyone either, but the player attacks are wildly unbalanced as well. I'd say about 80% of the moves in the game do roughly the same amount of damage and have roughly the same hitbox in front of you. But then the last 20% consists of the AoE and multi-hit moves. In the case of when the enemies have AoE moves, if you don't have a fast enough creature, you're just fucking dead. But when the player gets access to them, they're the best general purpose attacks in the game, whether it's dropping mushroom spores on people, or in the case of the pigtail, just straight up farting. Yes, ripping ass is one of the most powerful moves in the game. And now that I think about it, that's kind of soulful and hilarious in a completely retarded way. As for the multi-hit attacks, this isn't something I discovered in my first playthrough, but when I experimented with them in my second, I realized how much stronger these are than literally everything else in the game. The supposed trade-off is that they have a random spread, but in the case of the Devil Coach Beetle's tail, you can get access to this thing in the first hour, and if even half the water droplets hit, it one-shots every basic enemy type in the first half of the game. Now, there's only a few multi-hit attacks in the game, and the mech arms have such a wide spread that really they could only hit really big creatures and actually do any significant damage. But it's just bizarre that this combat would be so fucking limited, except in this one way that just multiplies your DPS several times over. So you can just employ these hit and run style tactics on basically every enemy in the game. The only other way to play is to build a creature so tanky that he can get hit several times before dying, and then you can just bulldoze through everything, but that's not really much more fun. And as you would expect, there's basically no AI at all. The thing just runs in a straight line toward you, initiates attack, run in a straight line toward you, initiate attack. That's every single basic enemy in the game. And there are bosses, which are a bit of a mixed bag, but I would say they're still leaning on pretty well designed given the rest of this game's combat system. But just like the difficulty of the rest of this game, they're either incredibly easy or just really janky and hard for the wrong reasons. And to wrap up this segment, the only amount of true creativity that I got to exercise was that there's a couple parts that give you regenerating health, and you get the ability to switch between presets of different mutations. So you can instantly press a direction on the D-pad to go from your big tank monster to your flying monster to your ranged monster, etc., etc. But there's a way to completely break the game where you set up your super tank monster of death, and then when he gets on low health, you switch to a tiny monster that can regenerate health and is super fast, and you just fly away from all the enemies, get all your health back for free, go back in with the tank monster and kill everything. Now, I'm not seriously complaining about balance in a game with a combat system this terrible. In fact, I would kind of say it's a good thing that the game even allows you to get that creative with it, but I really wish that it was just fun to play. It is inherently unfun to have to stand still every time you attack. There's no way getting around it. It completely limits the enemy design, the player skill expression, and the total height of the skill ceiling. Every element of the encounters are balanced around both you and the opponent standing still, which is why it goes jank as fuck whenever you get attacked by like 5 or more enemies at the same time. The biggest example of that being possibly the first boss you fight in the game, the Ant Queen, where the entire gimmick of this fight is she just stands on the other end of the room while 50 ants are chasing you at the same time. Despite this being either the first or second boss in the game, it is probably the second hardest, just because you have no good way of dealing with groups of enemies at this point. So you just run around in a big circle to slowly kill all her ant minions, or you have to do like hit and run tactics to try and hit her once, then run away. Either way, it takes like 5 minutes to kill the boss. Now, that being said, I think that is my only serious complaint with this game. Yes, it's a pretty big one. Combat being bad in an action-adventure game certainly hurts it a bit. But if you consider the fact that The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time is still considered to be possibly the greatest game of all time, and its combat system is ass, there's obviously other redeeming elements of video games that can still make them worth playing, and this is certainly one of those cases. Obviously, the main appeal of the game is the Spore-like element, where you can mix and match all the creature parts, but I also think that the level design is pretty solid as well. Like I said before, these are kind of mini sandbox levels, each one being a different biome. You have different animals to kill and take their parts. But this game also has really solid collectathon elements, and this is split into several different categories. The most basic being the progression system. Like I already mentioned, you get the parts by killing animals, but you also get biomass in several different ways, from eating fruit on the map, from doing mini quests for NPCs, which are also a way to unlock parts. Usually these involve just mutating into a similar creature to what you're talking to. Or maybe they want you to get something from another group of NPCs or kill them. And biomass is similar to the DNA points from Spore, though instead of spending them, they reflect the maximum amount of powerful parts you can equip. Every creature part you collect from a creature has stats attached to them, whether it's health, defense, attack, speed, jump, flight. And so obviously the more powerful parts have higher biomass costs, so you gotta constantly be killing everything to increase that maximum number over the course of the game. It's pretty simple, but it's very satisfying as that number is always going up just by playing the game. Another important collectible is scale points. These are what allow you to alter the size of your body parts. Making your head bigger gives you more damage, same with your arms. Your body and neck give you more health, so on and so forth. You kind of get the idea. And you can also spend these points to make the parts smaller, which increases your speed and the amount of stamina you have, which can be pretty useful as well. And getting back to the level design, something that I think was handled much better than the combat is how your parts actually affect the general controls and platforming experience of the game. Since your ability to jump is represented by one of the major stats, and one of your part slots is dedicated to wings, as you would expect, a lot of the secrets can be found high up or by gliding across massive gaps. It unironically reminded me a little bit of Spyro. While there actually is a decent amount of proper platforming in this game, almost all of it can be cheesed by simply having good enough parts and a high enough stamina bar. Again, I don't think that's a bad thing at all. I enjoy that kind of player freedom. The types of secrets that you'll find out of the way are these shrines. Each one of them represents a different animal, and you have to fulfill a task to unlock the animal that the shrine is depicting, either by transforming to a different specific animal, completing some kind of challenging task, or sometimes just reaching the place is good enough. There's these VAC facilities which require keypad codes that you find from weird slug NPCs, and each one of these gives you a part to create a human, because no disgusting abomination is complete without a human head. There's an interesting puzzle in the second area of the game where you have to get really small to fight a tiny beetle boss. Unfortunately, it's the only implementation in the game similar to that, but I thought that was pretty cool. Another example is there's a cliff's edge in the third area, and there's actually a loading zone to a secret island level at the end of a huge gap. And so you have to build the perfect flying creature with a combination of jump and flight stat and reducing the weight of the creature and getting as much stamina as possible. So that's kind of like a puzzle in and of itself. And yet another one I enjoyed is about halfway through, you explore a secret laboratory, you learn the lore about how these strange seeds got created that can morph into various different creatures. Apparently, your character was created by a woman. Ew, woke, am I right? Yeah, unironically, the good guy is a female scientist, Lucia, and there's an evil Dr. Hargraves who's the final boss of the game. And whatever, it's not really worth reading into or taking seriously on any level. I wouldn't really call this game propaganda or woke, unironically, but the point is you actually get Lucia's head, yes, a scientist's head, which gives you the ability to read that you need at a few instances in this game. There's also certain quests that you can do to progress, though there seems to always be an alternative way. Like, for example, there's velociraptors who want you to steal some honey from some bees for some reason. But this is a game where you can kill every NPC, so if you just kill them, you can go to the next area. It's that simple. And there's a surprising amount of other elements I could praise about this game. I like how there's like mini game races, which really encourage you to build that perfect speed creature. There's these arcade cabinets around where you just play Snake. That's actually a pretty decent mini game distraction. I'm also glad that the devs felt no need to limit what types of animals you could steal parts from. I mean, for basically no reason at all, there's a velociraptor and a triceratops in this game, though it's criminal that there's no T-Rex to go along with them. I guess even better than a T-Rex, there's a dragon. So yeah, it's not just real-world animals. There's also a mech. I don't know how the fuck your slime turns into a giant mech, but that's kind of cool as well. There's various cosmetics to unlock, whether it's goofy hats you can place all over your creature, or different skins which alter the texture, and you can give them all sorts of different colors as well. The game is actually pretty densely packed with content despite only being about 8 hours long. I also have to give the devs credit that they added a water level in a free update, and although it's very short, you could probably beat it in about 15 minutes. The water controls are actually really good. I just wish there was more to it. I mean, it's basically just one boss and a few more enemy types that have the same exact AI as every other enemy in this game, but still added more fun and more collectathon elements to it. So in conclusion, should you buy Strange Seed? Actually, yeah, I think probably on sale. Just because, again, like, I'm not gonna lie to you, this game feels very cheap at times, but it is genuinely creative. It feels like it actually innovates on the Spore concept and does something of value with it instead of just being a novelty in and of itself. It definitely is not the type of game I would recommend to someone who only likes high-budget games or well-polished games, because this is certainly neither one of those. It is definitely a janky indie 3D slop kind of game. But I would be lying to you if I said I didn't have fun. I legitimately did enjoy this game. This is one of the best games I've played this year. I especially just love this character creator, man. Yeah, if it was more like Spore, it would be a little bit better, allowing you to articulate every piece of the spine to handcraft the perfect creature that way. But the way it's implemented into this game still works extremely well. It controls better than you'd ever expect. Even though the combat is beyond abysmal, I would still say just the novelty of combining all these perfect creature qualities into the ultimate killing machine, or the ultimate flight creature, or something that can heal itself to full health, or even just the swimming. The swimming in the free update is surprisingly good too. That's just inherently fun and novel on its own. Maybe just because I've played over 1,000 video games at this point in my life, but I have a serious craving for novelty in general, and I think this game satisfies that. I've always wanted a sequel or spiritual successor to Spore. Of course, EA was never going to give any of us what we want, but I genuinely think Strange Seed is a step in the right direction. It just needs more. This definitely needs a sequel or maybe more updates, maybe a paid DLC. I'd be fine with any of those things. It definitely needs the combat system to be revamped because as it stands right now, it's just incredibly unfun and boring, and it's really the only negative I'd hold against this game. Everything else is charming or interesting in some way, but the combat's gotta go. And I think maybe the progression system needs a little better balancing because the new creature parts in each area just being better than the old ones means that all of the end game optimal ultimate life form creatures are gonna look the same. But yeah, I'm not gonna lie to you, I actually quite enjoyed this game. I think you should give it a try. Obviously, don't spend too much money for it, but it was a good time, and it feels nice every once in a while to make a positive game review. Because obviously the next review is going to be for the Assassin's Creed 4 remake that I think we all know is going to be a cheap cash grab. So yeah, give Strange Seed a chance if it looks interesting to you, and I'll see you next time, guys.